Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. I am your host, Ed Dentzel. I hope you all had a great weekend. It's so peaceful up here where I'm staying these 2 weeks, babysitting my brother and his wife's dog. And the dog and I are getting along just fine, by the way. I don't think the dog is overtly thrilled with me. I'm a friend of his. I'm a part of his pack. You know, he sees me enough to know who I am. But I wouldn't say that he's exactly enamored with me. And truthfully, on top of everything else, this dog, don't get me wrong, friendly dog, not a real cuddler. Likes to go off and lie. He likes to go lie by himself away from people. Doesn't like to snuggle. He just wants to go outside by himself, lay in the sun, come back inside, get cool on the tiled floor. When he gets cold, he wants to go back outside. He's a little bit spoiled. But on top of that, he just doesn't have that snuggly kind of personality. He doesn't mind playing necessarily, like fetching something, or you act like you're going to chase after him and he'll run and stuff. But when it comes to just being inside and sitting around, he just kind of wants to be on his own. He wants to go in his bed. And when he needs you, he'll let you know. He's that kind of dog. Once again, not a mean dog, friendly dog. Somewhat self-centered dog. So there's that. But he and I are getting along just fine. I suppose if I keep feeding him and letting him go outside and getting him water, we'll get along. That will continue to be so. Of course, yesterday was Mother's Day. Got to talk to my mother. I was glad that the Pittsburgh Pirates decided to win on Mother's Day for her. She's a huge Pirates fan, and there was a point yesterday in that Cardinals-Pirates game where I thought that Michael Wacha was going to get the best of them. Then all of a sudden the Pirates started hitting, and before you knew it, they had 10 runs, and they ended up winning 10-5. So that was nice, winning 2 out of 3 in St. Louis. I've made the point that I think it's very possible that the Pirates may have a better record against almost every team that they play this year, a winning record, but then against the Cubs not win a game. That is very, very possible, considering what the Cubs are doing right now. So it was nice to see the Pirates go into St. Louis and win 2 of 3. The Cardinals aren't the team that they were the last couple of years. Let's just admit that. They just aren't. They just aren't. They don't hit as well. They don't pitch as well. They don't field as well. They've just come down to me about 10%. Not a lot, 5 to 10%. And actually the Pirates, at least hitting, have gotten better. And I think it's paying off so far because the Pirates have beaten them 5 times so far this year and only lost to them once. I could have never seen that happening a couple years ago. So let's get to the show. I got to see the new Captain America movie, Captain America Civil War. And I want to talk about it in the context of politics and what's going on here in the real world. I'm not a comic book guy. Never got into them, even though I'm a writer, novelist. I've written 6 or 7 novels. Really never got into comic books, probably because you could go through them so fast. And really, I'm not much into art, like drawing art. I can't draw. My stick figure drawing is even horrible. Paintings, I guess, are interesting to me. I went to the Salvador Dali Museum, which is in St. Petersburg, Florida. You talk about a weird place to put a Salvador Dali museum. It just seems kind of weird to me. But I've been there. Enjoyable, but I'm not into art. So comic books are, 1/3 story, 2/3 art? Probably the reason. But I have liked the superhero movies. And I thought that this Captain America movie, Civil War movie, was excellent. I really did. I think that they've done such a good job converting these action movies into movies with a message. They aren't just those 80s shoot 'em up cars crashing with a very, very thin plot, where the acting is, of course, Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know what I mean. The depth that Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson and the rest of them bring to their characters is really good. And this isn't new in this movie. This has been going on since the first Marvel, what we consider to be the first Marvel movie. I guess The Incredible Hulk or the one with Eric Bana, even though that wasn't necessarily a great movie, the acting was just something new in the superhero genre, in contrast to the Spider-Man movies and to that point, the Batman movies, where it was like a lot of it was tongue-in-cheek. There is no tongue-in-cheek in these movies. Even though there is funny parts, the acting is not tongue-in-cheek. It's serious. But the political side of it is also very compelling, that they just don't have these superheroes, fighting against a bad guy. They have real-world issues. And the one that is brought up in Captain America Civil War, and I think it's done fairly well, is the issue of government oversight. And does something necessarily get better because government is in charge of it? Or should people be able to figure out the problems in the world and go about trying to fix them on their own? That's very generalized in both cases. In Civil War, you have the Captain America side team who, Captain America doesn't want any government oversight because he believes that government people, they have agendas and they might make the wrong decision. And whereas he is the guy with the special powers, he's the guy with the experience, with the knowledge, with the talent, and of course superhuman abilities in all aspects of thinking and fighting. And he leads a bunch of people who are exactly like that. And I know what he's thinking. You can see it. And he is, granted, he's a little sanctimonious and a little self-righteous in the movie. And he doesn't want to be controlled by the United Nations, which is something that, of course, we as conservatives can perfectly understand. On the other hand, you have Captain America side, or you have Iron Man side. And you should know, given the choice between the two, I think I'm more of an Iron Man guy, even though I'm not necessarily on his side in this film. I mean, how could I be on the side of the guy or the group that really wants to give control of superheroes over to the United Nations? As a conservative, I can't do that. But I understand also what Iron Man is thinking, and the truth is that Iron Man, Tony Stark, is a scarred individual. He's become a very scarred individual. He has lots of regrets. He has lots of regrets about the innocent people that he and the Avengers have killed in trying to stop evil in the world. Whether it's from the first Avengers movie or his own, Iron Man and his battles against the Mandarin and others, he has a lot of guilt going on. And we saw that in Iron Man 3. He has that post-traumatic stress disorder where he has these panic attacks with the slightest provocation. And that's motivating him. So he's looking for a way how to fix this. What can I do to handle this? Where it doesn't seem that the other Avengers, whether they're on either side, on Captain America's team or Iron Man's team, have as much guilt going on. And maybe it's because Tony Stark knows that with his company for those decades, all those decades, was making missiles and bombs that were killing many people. And we saw kind of his change in the first Iron Man movie. So he has a lot of baggage. But what's interesting to me is that, and to me, it goes beyond even the military politics in real life whether you go into somewhere and worry about civilian casualties like with ISIS or fighting Iran or whoever, fighting Al-Qaeda, whatever the case may be, that I think what Captain America understands, and maybe because he is the guy that comes from a different generation. Remember, he was from the 30s, early 40s, and then he gets frozen and comes back alive in the 2000s. Is that was a time when civilian casualties and collateral damage, not that they weren't a concern, but they were just seen as being part of the war. In World War II, for example. That's just the way it goes. It was these bad guys who started something. We're going to have to go take care of them. And the short-term collateral damage is worth it. And that's essentially even though I know at the beginning of this movie, not to give too much away, he and his team try to plan it out that no civilians get killed. Well, in the end, some do. Not many, but a few do. And that's what brings on these Sokovia Accords, where the governments of the world, culminating in the United Nations, want to have a say over what the Avengers can do, when they can do it, who's involved, and should they kill any civilians, that they have to pay for what they've done. And Captain America doesn't want to have anything to do with it. And Iron Man, Tony Stark, sees that as a way to try to start to fix things. But even he kind of starts to change in the end, but I don't want to give it away. And then he goes back the opposite direction, and for very good reason. And in fact, you could say at the end of this movie, it's going to take a little doing to get this all patched up in future movies, which I guess will happen in Avengers or Captain America, whatever it's going to be called, the Infinity Wars, which aren't coming out till, next year or the year after. So you're going to have to wait. But it's pretty heartbreaking what happens at the end of this movie. However, what I see in this, there's something in real life that goes beyond this, just military politics in real life, where the United States should go. Should we be isolationist? Should we be interventionist? Should we worry about the collateral damage? Well, we could talk about that just right here in the United States. Because I think too many people, and you've heard me talk about this before, too many people, I think, when they're going to watch the movie, I think most people are going to be on the Captain America side, I think. And not because he's called, quote-unquote, Captain America. I think they're going to see that overall that the Avengers are a good idea. They mean well. They're putting their lives at risk. And some problems are going to happen. The problem is, in real life, people are not like that. So they'll go to the movies, they'll see what happens there, and they'll cheer as Captain America and the rest of them, Iron Man, when they're working together, are killing the bad guys, but they know the buildings are getting blown up, and they know within there some regular people, like Sokovia in Age of Ultron, people are getting killed, but they don't mind that. In real life, people do mind that. Not just in war, but in the financial side of what is happening in the United States. This goes along the lines with what I've told you, that if we're going to get the United States to a point where it's going to be better than it is right now, then it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I've told you that one of the reasons that we have not gone in the direction of conservatism is, truthfully, down deep, people are afraid of that because they believe that they're going to get hurt by it. When we start talking about getting rid of the minimum wage and having free trade and getting rid of some of these regulations and getting rid of government grants and cutting back on these social programs because we can't afford them, transfer payments from the rich in this country to the poor in this country, people start getting nervous to the point of them not liking part of it, even though they themselves may be conservative. I guess to put it in Hollywood terms, I think these people who love what Captain America and Iron Man have done over the years in these movies, they're perfectly fine with it if the fight doesn't come to their town. And in fact, one of the plots, one of the stories that develops in the first Avengers movie is the very reason that S.H.I.E.L.D. is trying to use the Tesseract to create weapons is because of what happened when Thor came down in his movie and in fighting the destroyer leveled that town. So the rest of the world doesn't care that that town gets leveled and gets wiped off the map, but I'm sure the people in that town didn't like it. Even though, in the bigger picture, if Thor and those buddies of his don't destroy that destroyer would have destroyed the world. But here we are, worried about a small town regarding this. Now, I know that sounds like, well, the greater good, or what's the alternative? See, this is something people do not see the federal government and an increasing bureaucracy as the destroyer, once again, for example, in that Thor movie. Not enough people yet see the federal government in its current structure as being the Chitauri from the first Avengers movie. They don't see it as the Ultron in the Age of Ultron movie. They don't see it as the United Nations wanting to take over the Avengers. They don't see that yet. And you know the reason people don't see that yet? It's partly, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, it's our fault as conservatives. We've done a lot of talking about that, but we have not yet convinced people, and it's the reason that somebody like a Donald Trump can kind of come in and quote-unquote, save the day and make America great again, is we just haven't been able to convince people that we can't go on this current path. There is no path if you're going to rely on the destroyer from the first Thor movie, or rely on whatever the enemy was called in the second Thor movie, or if you're going to rely on the Ironmonger or whatever, Steelmonger, whatever that guy's played by Jeff Bridges in the first Iron Man movie, or played by the Mandarin in the third movie. That is what the federal government is. Now, you can ignore it because you don't want to hurt these people over here or hurt these innocent people over there. It'll just get worse. And it's a topic that comes up in the movie. They don't discuss it quite a bit enough, but me as a political person, maybe I'd expect more out of it. They don't, but you can see it. I guess you could see between the lines. Captain America and his team, his group, they're going to do the best they can to avoid civilian casualties. But if civilian casualties happen, they see that being better than that bad guy, that bad force, that bad computer program, those aliens continuing to take over the world. It's one or the other because it can't be neither. It can't be neither. It's going to be one or the other or both. It's not neither. Captain America's attitude is that if we don't take care of them right now, then when you take care of it somewhere down the road, even more people are going to get killed. And in that, he's right. Just like dealing here with a federal government the way it is right now, it's the same thing. Had this been nipped in the bud, we'd been able to do it at some point in the past, to try to get everything back online would have affected very, very few people. Too late for that now. Too late. This is what bothers us as conservatives about too many Republicans, of course, most Democrats, and a guy like Donald Trump, is that they'll try to convince you that everybody can be fixed. And if there is going to be any pain, the only pain that's going to be felt are for those people who deserve it. I'm sorry, people, but nobody has that kind of control. When you have over 300 million people, when you have a $5 trillion budget, when you have 6 billion people on this planet, there is no way that a government or a private person can have control about who's going to be affected and who's going to get hurt and who's not going to be affected and who doesn't get hurt. This is why the issue of illegal immigration, for example, I think has worked. It's an argument that's worked. It's not portrayed in the right way, and we as conservatives have not been able to get out in front of the issue. There's too many people, too many conservatives who have convinced a lot of the American people, a lot who aren't that conservative, that we're going to take care of this illegal immigration problem and nobody in the United States is going to suffer. Moreover, it's not only you not going to suffer, you're going to benefit from it. It's going to be a fix-all. You know that town that you live in where crystal meth has taken over out all the business and everybody's become a tweaker? And you have your neighbors who are growing marijuana and that still factory moved out of there. And all these houses are run down. You go drive down Main Street, and all those homes are empty, or all those storefronts are empty. We fix illegal immigration, that's all going to change. Suicide rate we have in this country can be fixed by immigration. And it's crazy. Although I believe in a strong immigration policy, I don't need to sell it along the lines that it's going to fix everything. But I think that's the reason so many people have gone along with it. Because they surely aren't worried about the law. They're only worried about what it does for them. Because if they were worried about the law, they wouldn't accept all of these other things. But they do. Why? Because they benefit from them. But illegal immigration, they believe that they don't benefit from it. So suddenly we have to take care of it. This is the problem we have in the United States. Likewise, it's a problem that occurs in this movie. It's not that these world leaders don't want these aliens and bad guys stopped. They want it done to the level of perfection. Not possible. But in the movie, unfortunately, the United Nations, along with Tony Stark and others, that's what they're trying to sell. That's what they're trying to sell. So it's a fascinating topic in the movie, and it's something that I think, and that's once again why superhero movies have gotten so good within the last 10 years, is that you can start to see correlations between the stories that are told in the movies, and they are relatable to real life issues. The Batman movies, there were a lot of analogies drawn between Christopher Nolan's films, especially the second one, The Dark Knight, with the Joker, Heath Ledger as the Joker. Correlation between that and George W. Bush and who he became as president, kind of the Dark Knight. People knowing you need him but not liking him at the same time. Age of Ultron. Computer, people afraid of AI, afraid of drones, afraid of robots being able to think for themselves. Right? In the first Iron Man movie, there's a topic of terrorism and the proliferation of dangerous weapons, all real-life concerns. And so we get back to here to Civil War. You have a couple different attitudes toward what is to be done about evil in the world. The problem we have in real life is that I think most people, once again, are going to go see the Captain America movie and agree with him. But in real life, they agree with Tony Stark. I think. when it comes to government interaction. We have to make sure that people don't get killed, and if we're going to do this economic program, we have to make sure that these people don't suffer, those people don't suffer. Most importantly, that I don't suffer. And that's the problem. But it is a great movie. Granted, you come out of this movie, there are many things, and I don't mean to portray Captain America's side as being the better side, because you know what? You find out some things about Captain America and his side that aren't too flattering either. But I don't want to ruin it for anybody. I'm just giving you the overall plot. Because just when you think, let's put it this way, just when you think that Captain America is doing the right thing and everything, you find out that he's not as good and as perfect as he has portrayed himself to be. And in fact, I was watching this YouTube show called Beyond the Trailer. I think the woman's name is Grace Randolph. I think she does a great job with that. Although she gets her politics wrong. She says that if Captain America would be a Bernie Sanders supporter, let's not get crazy. But she talks about how in the review of the movie, she actually got a little turned off to Captain America. The self-righteousness that, well, if I decide it, then it must be so. It must be right. So there's a lot of people to like and dislike in the film, and I hope that when you go see it, that you can compare it not just to violence that goes on in the world, not just the good guys versus the bad guys against ISIS or North Korea, but I'm hoping that you can see the domestic issue part of it as well. Regarding big government, regarding illegal immigration, regarding minimum wage, and all those issues as well. And I think if you do that, you'll understand that we have a long way to go. Because we have too many people that want change, but they don't want to suffer from it. They want somebody else to suffer. And I've told you, we're so far down the rabbit hole to draw an analogy to another movie that's coming out this summer, that if we're to get this right back on track, everybody's going to have to suffer. That's not what you like hearing from me, but I really do believe that, because all of us, no matter how conservative we've become or are, one way or another, we rely, we depend, can become comfortable with many aspects of our federal government that are no good and are completely unconstitutional. But unfortunately, we love the power of the federal government when it works on our behalf, even if what it's doing is unconstitutional. That's a huge problem, and it's something that we as conservatives haven't talked enough about. One more thing regarding this movie. Spider-Man appears in it, and he, to me, was, even though he's only in it for maybe half hour of a over 2-hour movie, definitely makes an impact. The most recent Spider-Man movies have not been good. And in fact, they've kind of missed the bigger picture that I think that Marvel has seen in its other Avenger movies, whereas Spider-Man's kind of like been off on his own. I thought the actor, forget his name right now, played Spider-Man very well. Funny, good CGI, working with one part of the Avengers. I'm not going to give you which side, but if you've seen the trailers, you probably already know already. But he makes an appearance, and he definitely kicks butt for a while. But then, on the other hand, which makes it so good, is that you see, as good as he is, he still has a lot to learn. Because in the fighting, he's going up against, of course, a bunch of people who have been in many, many fights against really, really dangerous people, whereas at this point, Spider-Man has just been fighting against car thieves and things like that. So he does a really good job, but he gets a little worn out. But it's fantastic the way it happens, and I think that gives that character a lot of room to grow when Spider-Man movies start coming out, I guess, next year. It gives him a good way to mature and to rise to the level of the other Avengers. It was pretty good. But I'm going to go to the break. We'll move to other things after the break. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.
The voice of American conservatism. WRS Digital, Red State Talk Radio.
And welcome back to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio. During that quick break, I decided I wanted to opine on one more small part that I touched upon, but I think I just glossed over it, that I think is fascinating. I mentioned that show Beyond the Trailer that Grace Randolph does, or is it Grace Rudolph? You can just go to YouTube, just do a search for Beyond the Trailer. You'll know what I'm talking about. I told you how she decided that Captain America, if he was a real-life person, would be a big Bernie Sanders fan, which is not something I see at all. And I think what I think is fascinating about movies is how people can put their own politics onto a character. I've brought this up a while ago. It hasn't come up. But somebody like John McClane in Die Hard came out in 1988. I think he's a conservative or a liberal. Now, the only reason that Die Hard is popular is because both liberals and conservatives like that movie. There's a reason that it seems that it's on all the time on TV. I know it is, even though I don't have TV anymore. There's a reason that it's an iconic movie. The only way it can become iconic is because people all over the political spectrum like that movie. So when conservatives watch it, I'm sure they see John McClane as a good family guy. Yeah, he's having some family problems, but he's a cop. He doesn't run away from violence. He wants to do the right thing. He wants to save all those people. And through all of that, he is seen as a conservative guy. And in fact, you could say that the following movies do nothing to change maybe a person's opinion that he's probably a conservative, probably liked Ronald Reagan, being that came out in the 1980s, probably would have voted for Ronald Reagan. Whereas liberals who also like that movie, and I've worked with liberals. That movie came up. They love it. There's a lot of liberal guys out there who love that movie. They look at it and they think, oh, John McClane's from New York City. He's a cop, which means he's a union member. If he's from New York City, most likely he's a liberal, most likely would have been against Ronald Reagan and probably voted for David Dinkins or any Democrat who was up for mayor of New York City. Once again, blending reality and fiction. Doesn't get too crazy about it being a Christian holiday of Christmas. So I'm sure if we sat down on both sides of the political aisle, there would be a lot for conservatives and liberals to like about the character of John McClane. You could bring this up with James Bond. Is James Bond part of the Labor Party or a part of the Tory Party? Conservatives would think he's part of the Tory Party. The liberals in Europe would probably think he's part of the Labor Party. I put our own politics onto these characters, even though those particular characters never express their politics. Because we want to believe that that character is like us. So it's funny then that this woman, Grace, who does this show, very popular show, who watches tons and tons and tons is into comic books, lots of movies, especially any movie that has anything to do with comic books, not just Batman and Marvel, but X-Men and Deadpool and the rest of it. She sees Captain America as being a Bernie Sanders guy, whereas you will see other articles about that movie Captain America Civil War reviews, or people who do politics commenting on the movie that say that Captain America is a libertarian, which is exactly almost the opposite of what Bernie Sanders is. It's kind of funny, isn't it? We see what we want to see. We project onto fictional characters our own beliefs. There's something about that will never cease to amaze me and fascinate me, the way people do that. And I think, given what is going on with Donald Trump, I think it's kind of the same thing. A lot of people, I told you last week, a lot of people see him as a savior. The weird part is that there are people who are Democrats that see what he's saying and love it. And there are people exactly the opposite, as conservatives see what he's saying and love it. This kind of goes back to the Barack Obama years. Barack Obama, when he was running for president. People projected onto Barack Obama what these people have as their own ideas about the way the world should go. It was nothing that Barack Obama said, because he really didn't say much anything. And that's what's so dangerous about all of this. It's just a fascinating point to me. Don't know if there's any articles that are written about that on the internet or not, but maybe I should look for that. Fictional characters and whether they're conservative or liberal, and how liberals and conservatives in real life will make arguments that the characters one way or the other. Let's move on. On redstate.com, the other Red State, I'm seeing that they're going to start to have some posts about where conservatism has gone wrong. What happened that allowed Donald Trump to come in and just blaze right through this primary process, beating a lot of good conservatives along the way. And it's more than just a numbers thing. What was it about him? And does conservatism need to change? You know the way I feel about this. I've been doing kind of an autopsy on conservatism. I knew conservatism was in trouble. Not necessarily, the ideas don't change. The ideas, what I'm saying, the group, the people that make it up, the conservatism exists whether any particular person believes it or not. It's no different than physics. For the longest time, people had no idea what physics was, but it existed. Every time they let something slip from their hands, it fell to the ground. Gravity existed. Acceleration existed. Velocity existed. Even though people didn't understand it, it still existed, just wasn't studied yet. Didn't understand it, but it existed. Same way with conservatism. Conservatism exists outside of a person's mind. It's just not an idea. It's not like a story for a movie where it didn't exist anywhere and then somebody comes up with it in their mind. Conservatism is what I would call almost a law of nature. It exists outside of humans. So it's not the problem. It's the way that it's been marketed, and we now see those cracks. I've been talking about this for about 6 months now. And I think that we shouldn't do too much navel gazing, because what has happened over the last 8 months is a human problem, not an ideas problem. And sometimes those 2 points are hard to separate. It's kind of like the idea, I've heard this a lot in my life, being that I've been around a lot of liberals. It's not the belief in God that gets us in trouble. It's what humans do with it. That's what we hear a lot of people say. People that don't want to go the whole atheist route because you know what? They're hedging their bets. What if there is a God? And then I'm an atheist. And I die and I go straight to hell. So these people, but they don't want to get along with religion because they think that religion is too overbearing. It's too structured. It's too judgmental. It's hateful. It dislikes homosexuals and all these other types of people. And it's not the God's bad. It's just what people have done with it is bad. Well, that might be in Jim Jones' case. I agree. They're right. The rest of it, you'd have a hard time convincing me of that. And when I hear something like that, it's just somebody that's saying something. It's because, as we know, atheism has killed way more people in the history of the world than any sort of belief in any system, in any religion has. I mean, you could stack up all the people that atheists killed in the 20th century, and it would dwarf the murders by all religions since the beginning of time. It would dwarf it. But somehow Christianity, religions are the problem. So, but we do have that kind of thing going on in conservatism. Is that, and really what has gone on, what the big problem has been, is that we found out that our coaches, well, as I've been saying, it's time for them to go. They've been running the team for quite a few years now. And you know what? That team's not winning. And now we see the cracks when conservatism had stress put on it. Those coaches wanted to run for the hills. They wanted to give up. And that's what has gone on. And I still stand by the fact that had Rush Limbaugh and the rest of these people, had they stuck to what they said their principles were for the last 25 years, had they back in June started hammering Trump and saying as conservatives and Republicans, you can't vote for this guy, Trump goes nowhere. Now see, to me it's a little bit different with Fox News, is because really in my mind Fox News has never been that conservative anyway. You know how I feel about Bill O'Reilly. I don't like him. Greta Van Susteren, don't like her. It doesn't seem to me to be that conservative. The only reason people think it's conservative is because for so many years it has been different than the rest of the news. Granted, it does cover news in a different way, but you look at a lot of those hosts, even before Donald Trump, and you could say, Bill O'Reilly, middle of the road. Greta Van Susteren, who knows? Right? And they do have a lot of liberal kooks on that show. On that channel, I should say. But those people who've been selling conservatism to us and been coaching us for 20 years, they're the ones that have been the real problem. So when RedState.com starts doing this, the other Red State, that is something that is going to have to be covered. If it's not, then we're just kidding ourselves. Like I said, if we think that we can go back to the old way, the way it was a couple years ago with all of these people on the radio and on TV, then this has all been a waste of time. All these complaining about Rush Limbaugh and not going to listen to him anymore. If you go back to listening to him next year, that's on you. That's on you. So I'm bothered by it. It hurts. It does hurt. But I am not the doomsdayer about conservatism that others are. Simply because I believe that we got beat this time by a lot of our people who sold out. I think of that. I think of the scene in Braveheart where the British have hired the Irish to come and fight with them. Remember that? And then when it gets to that battle, the British send the Irish out to fight first, and then, of course, the British will get all the glory, come in and clean everything up. And what happens? The Irish run over, and they look like they and the Scots are going to have this huge battle. And what do? They go over, and they start hugging each other and shake hands, and then the British king, the King of England, or whoever he was, makes some comment about the Irish and not being able to trust them, something like that. That's what was going on here. We thought that well, in our case, some of the best soldiers were going to be able to fight against Donald Trump. Instead, when they ran into Donald Trump, they shook hands with him and had dinner with him. After misleading us about their intentions all these years. That's all that's gone on. So because of that, I'm not willing to say that the true full force of conservatism went up against Donald Trump and lost. That's not what happened. It's not what happened. We had coaches who were on the take. We had coaches who were betting on the other side. And in fact, if this was Major League Baseball, these conservatives would never make it to the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. So let's not do too much navel-gazing. I mean, we do have problems. I've told you what I think the problems are. We don't call out our own people enough, regular people. We've gotten too many conservative leaders have gotten comfortable with just saying our listeners are just the best people in the world. Well, guess what? They're not. They're making all sorts of unconservative decisions every day, and it's killing the rest of us. Now, if you're not willing to talk in those terms, you shouldn't be considered a leader of conservatism. You just shouldn't. You could be a leader of something else. You can go have a job, make millions of dollars, but you can't be a leader of conservatism if you're going to put up with people who defy it, who act in the opposite way of it. You know, surely a good, if you want to bring religion into this, surely some good Christian leader, priest, pastor, whatever else, the minister, would surely call out any of his parishioners who started talking about how good atheism is. Surely a minister would do that. Surely. But we haven't been doing that in conservatism. We let conservatives send their kids to public schools. They accept government grants. They want their Social Security checks to go up, even though the government's already broke. They want the minimum wage to go up so their son or daughter can make a little bit more money, on and on. But they call themselves conservatives because they're pro-life and they own a gun. It's crazy. Crazy. That's been one of the big problems. And those people have worked their way in, and that's why I think it's become comfortable. It became very easy for our conservative leaders, the well-known ones, to start cheating on the rest of us who've been living according to our values, according to conservative values. So let's not get too crazy about how conservatism got beat this time. We got beat. But not because we were wrong. It's just some of our fighters decided to be traitors. Another part to this, and this is something I have in my notes every once in a while, I never get to it. What should have been a good indicator of what was going to happen this time around, and once again, you know, hindsight tends to be 20/20. You know, I'm on Twitter a lot. You know, I tweet every day. I tweet about this show, tweet about articles that I'm reading, and I get a lot of responses to that. For the last couple years, being that I'm on Twitter so much, you know what I noticed? How so many Tea Party Twitter accounts are defunct. They were started sometime 2009, 2010, 2011, and now so many. If you go on there and just do a search for Tea Party for an account, you start going through them, and a large majority of them haven't been used in at least a couple years. So you had people that were all energetic, all pumped up to the point of starting a Tea Party account, and then somewhere they lost passion for it. And I've told you, go way back when the Tea Party started, and this was before, of course, Red State Talk Radio. I was on here, but I was doing my own show on my own website. That I predicted this because I believe that, you start getting into that, and a lot of people are going to be like what I just talked about earlier. They're going to be conservative, but, well, that's part of conservatism. I'm mad about Obamacare, and I'm going to continue to be against that, but some of this other big government stuff, I kind of like it. Well, I guess I can't be a part of the Tea Party, and I knew that was going to happen. This is one of the reasons that I've never identified myself as a Tea Partier, on top of the fact that I don't like to identify myself with any group. I don't like to go to rallies and cheer and things like that. Just not in my character. I should say not in my personality. So that's a problem. And dare I say it, it's a lot of those people who thought they were part of the Tea Party, found out that it was more than they were willing to do, who are now supporting Donald Trump. And there have been articles that I've read recently that other people have happened upon this as well, talking about what has happened to the Tea Party movement. They were supposed to be against people like Donald Trump. And see, that was never my impression at all. Did I think that go hold Donald Trump? No, I didn't. But it also occurred to me, being that all of these people suddenly came out of their woodwork in 2009, 2010, it occurred to me that probably a lot of them aren't as conservatives as they think. Really, they're just maybe anti-Obama or just one-issue people, anti-Obamacare, pro-military. But when you put it all together, when you start talking about government financing and taxes and regulation, the minimum wage, illegal immigration, ISIS, pro-life, pro-gun, you put it all together, entitlements, they'd probably come out to get about a 60 on the conservativereview.com scale, which isn't that conservative. So that's an issue as well. It's an issue. That's part of the reason that conservatism didn't do well this time around either. You take for granted who your people are, and you start looking at this, and you find out they were just passionate one time, and then they just sort of lost passion for the whole thing. One more part before I go, and I'm sure I'm going to touch upon that, what conservatives can do better in the future. Almost every show now. But the problem I have, I think, the reason I don't see Donald Trump winning this time, if he's going to get the nomination, if that's going to happen, he's going to run against Hillary Clinton. I just did some quick mathematic calculations this weekend. John Kerry got 59 million votes in 2004. Barack Obama got about 69 million in 2008, got about 65 million in 2012. George W. Bush got 62 million of the popular vote in 2004, which was the most any candidate in either party had gotten in the history of the country until Barack Obama passed that up 4 years later. Given all of that, I think that it's easily possible that Hillary Clinton is going to get at least as many votes as John Kerry did in 2004, simply for the point that there are more people who are eligible to vote now than were in 2004. It's 12 years later. Frankly, there are just more Democrats in the country. That's just the way it is. And they're all legal voters. Which means that Donald Trump, to win, is at least going to have to get as many as George W. Bush did in 2004, which is 62 million votes. Which is easily more than John McCain got, more than Mitt Romney got. Now, do you see a guy who has such high unfavorables, has gotten less of the popular vote in the primaries than any Republican going back several years? He's not going to do anything to unify the party, on and on and on. Do you see him getting as many votes as George W. Bush did in 2004? The answer is a very loud no. The math just does not add up. I want to leave you with that. Maybe I'll talk more about that tomorrow, but I got to go. EdwardDentzel.com is where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio shows, along with Podomatic, Podbean, YouTube, and SoundCloud. EdwardDentzel.com/book is where you can find all of my old Red State Talk Radio, or you can /book. You can download the first chapter of my next novel, The Comebacks, Forgot what I was saying. Email me, edwarddentzel@reagan.com, Twitter, Dentzel Domain, Facebook, LinkedIn. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight. You've been listening to the Dentzel Domain on Red State Talk Radio.